On January 24th, an ICU nurse named Alex Pretti was shot and killed by ICE agents in Minneapolis. Officials say he was armed. Witness video suggests he may not have been. And within hours, the story exploded into a national debate about law enforcement, escalation, and whether this shooting was justified or completely avoidable. Now, instead of reacting emotionally or politically, I wanted to try something different. I sent the raw footage to AI and asked it to do two things. First, research everything publicly known about this case, and second, analyze only what can actually be seen and heard in the video itself. No speculation, no assumptions, no spin. Because when emotions run high, the clearest answers usually come from slowing everything down and looking at the facts. And trust me, what the AI concluded is far more blunt than I expected. Before we get into it, if you like calm, rational breakdowns of the world's most controversial events, consider subscribing. This is a brand new channel and your support genuinely helps more than you might think. Now, let's get into the analysis. Here is the exact prompt I used. Write a single, clear response in normal everyday language without bullet points or lists. Before analyzing the video footage, first, research recent reliable reporting about Alex Pretti ICE shooting in Minneapolis to understand who was involved, what is known about the events leading up to it, and the general public facts surrounding the case. After the background, analyze only what can be clearly seen and heard in the video footage I provide. Do not assume motives, intent, or hidden facts beyond what is visible on screen. Based strictly on the actions shown, explain how the situation escalated, which decisions increased risk, and whether the use of deadly force appears reasonable or avoidable from a neutral, common sense perspective. Acknowledge the limits of video evidence, but do not avoid forming an opinion. Avoid legal jargon, politics, or emotional language. Do not assign criminal guilt. Finish with a clear, plain language judgment about responsibility based on both the research context and the behavior visible in the video, rather than saying it depends or it's unclear. And this was the AI's response. Recent reporting paints a fairly consistent public picture of what happened, even though key details are still being investigated. On January 24th, 2026, Alex Pretti, a 37-year-old US citizen and ICU nurse in Minneapolis, was shot and killed by federal immigration enforcement personnel during a confrontation in South Minneapolis that unfolded around federal operation and nearby street activity. Federal officials have said he was armed and posed a threat, while multiple bystander videos described by major outlets have been cited as showing him holding a phone and not visibly brandishing a weapon at the critical moments. And state and local officials have pushed for an independent accounting and evidence preservation as legal and investigative disputes over access and chain of custody played out in the days after. This part already highlights the central problem. Two completely different versions of reality. On one side, federal officials say he was armed and threatening. On the other, bystander videos show something very different. Someone possibly holding a phone and not actively attacking. That contradiction alone is exactly why this case exploded. And it's also why video analysis matters so much, because when official statements and public footage don't align, trust collapses. Now let's move into what the AI actually saw in the footage itself. Visually, the sequence shows a winter street scene where Pretti is depicted near the roadway and then moving toward a cluster of people and uniformed agents, with a moment where he appears to step between a woman and agents as they close distance, followed by a rapid shift to physical control where bodies bunch up and someone is driven or pulled off balance near the curb. This is important. Visually, the sequence shows something very specific. A chaotic street scene, agents moving quickly, physical force, bodies collapsing into each other, and rapid escalation. In plain English, this was not a calm, controlled arrest. It was fast, crowded, tense, and unstable. And in situations like this, risk multiplies extremely fast. The person, identified by the captions as Pretti, is then on or near the ground while several agents converge, and at least one agent's arm movement is consistent with striking or forceful contact, though the actual object and exact impacts are not clearly visible. The clip does not clearly show muzzle flashes, a visible weapon in Pretti's hands, or an unmistakable last-second threat cue. This is the most critical moment. The AI explicitly states that it cannot clearly see a weapon in his hands at the moment when the shots are fired. It also doesn't see a clear clear, immediate lethal threat, and that distinction matters enormously, because deadly force is generally justified only when there is no alternative, and the footage, based purely on what's visible, does not clearly show that kind of unavoidable danger. Based strictly on what is visible, the escalation is driven less by Pretti attacking someone and more by fast-moving attempts by agents to clear space and assert control through spray and hands-on force, with Pretti's decision to physically insert himself into that contact zone predictably raising the risk of a violent outcome. From a neutral common sense perspective, deadly force looks more avoidable than necessary based on what can actually be seen. This is where the answer becomes blunt. The AI does not absolve Pretti completely. It says he increased risk by stepping into a violent enforcement situation. But, and this is the key point, it places greater responsibility on the agents because they escalated rapidly and moved to deadly force without clearly visible lethal threat. In other words, mistakes were made on both sides, but the final irreversible decision came from law enforcement. My plain language judgment is that Pretti bears some responsibility for increasing danger by stepping into a tense physical confrontation with armed agents, but the larger responsibility for the outcome shown falls on the agents, because the visible choices that most clearly drive the situation from conflict to fatality are the agent's rapid escalation to spray, takedown, strikes, and then shooting in a moment where the video does not show an immediate lethal threat that could not be handled without killing him. This is why these cases shake public trust so deeply. Because when people watch video footage and see confusion, crowding, physical control, and then gunfire without a clear life or death trigger, the natural reaction is disbelief. That doesn't mean every officer involved acted with bad intent. High stress situations create fear, panic, and tunnel vision. But it does mean that aggressive tactics, fast escalation, and tight physical proximity create deadly risk, even when deadly force might not be necessary. And that's the hardest truth here. Sometimes tragedy is not the result of evil intent, but of bad tactics colliding with human fear. Let me know in the comments what you think about this case and whether you agree or disagree with the AI's conclusion. And if you appreciate calm, rational analysis of major global events, make sure to subscribe. New videos like this are coming every week, because that's what this channel is about. Asking AI difficult questions, then slowing down to understand what the response actually means. Thank you for watching to the end. Until next time.